If you're tired of the standard business and marketing fundamentals, frameworks, and funnels, you need a little mischief. Get ready to turn up the volume on the CEO Mischief Maker podcast, where you access conversations with seasoned business owners who have smashed through mindset barriers, innovated the standard boring business and marketing playbooks, and executed future-paced strategies with bleeding-edge tools and tactics to micro-fail their way into massive success and growth. We are Mindset Impact Strategic Catalysts helping innovative entrepreneurs focus. We are CEO Mischief Makers. Ready to make a little mischief? Hey, CEO Mischief Makers, welcome to the conversation. I get to introduce you to a really cool gal, okay? I met my guest last year at a conference. I believe we met either in Denver or Nashville. I can't remember which because it was the same person conducting both of those conferences. But I get to chat today with Dr. Ellen Wong. Hey, Ellen, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on this show. I'm super excited. And we met in Nashville.
Nashville, yes. Denver was in, I think, April of 2022. Nashville, I think, was it October?
Mhm.
October, November? Yeah.
October.
Fantastic. Well, you were speaking about a pretty cool subject. So if we could just start, some of the people might not know who you are. So just kind of tell us what you do.
So, yeah, my name is Dr. Ellen Wong. I'm a naturopathic doctor and a chief happiness officer for entrepreneurs and executives. And I think based on that, one would guess, and probably pretty accurately, that I do a lot of work with clients and patients on improving their health, well-being, sense of life satisfaction, and elevating their happiness.
So when you did your talk about that, it opens a lot of eyes when you talk about these things, and how health is obviously impacted by that
Mm,
subject of happiness as well. So
mhm.
let's just kind of start back a little bit. I know I remember some of your story, but tell us what mindset shifts did you experience that led you to take your naturopathic education and apply happiness to the next level?
Mhm. Um, I'll just summarize it probably, and then we can go into a little bit of the details, but the biggest realization I had around the idea of happiness, there's two really big ones actually. One is that happiness is a fundamental human desire for 99.99% of the human beings on this earth. And yet, we certainly never learn about it in school. We don't really actively talk about how to create it in our lives. Um, and so when I was wrestling with my health concerns, which included years and years of anxiety and depression and burnout, what I realized was that with my medical training and the access to other types of therapies and other types of medical professionals around me, what healthcare is able to do is to take us from a place of negative. So we like sort of put anxiety and depression on the more I don't like calling it negative, but like let's say more negative emotions.
Mhm.
Healthcare is able to take us from that space of negative emotions to a space of just neutrality. You, in a doctor's eyes, are no longer sick if you test well on a lab test, whether it's your blood work or like questionnaires, whatever it is. And as long as you score or place within a certain reference range, you are considered not sick. And that's it. Like there's nothing sort of beyond that. And with all due respect to medical professionals, I think it's really important that we work on not being sick, but the majority of people don't truly want to live their life in a zone of neutrality, right? Most people want to feel happy, energized, radiant, joyful, flourishing, all those like vibrant words that we want to feel like we associate with. I suddenly realized that healthcare wasn't necessarily the answer into that realm. And so to answer your question, then the two biggest mindset shifts would be one, like if happiness is such a fundamental goal, then why aren't we talking more about it? And two, healthcare got me so far. I needed something else, another set of tools to take me from feeling neutral to happy.
Absolutely. And not only I love the way you just summarized that. And not only does the typical healthcare provider um are they only able to bring us to neutral, many times they can't even bring us to neutral. They can only alleviate some of that
Mm,
negativity and bring us less negative, let's
mhm,
say, right?
mhm,
So it
mhm,
isn't even on the other side positive. If you're,
mhm.
and I know you're looking at, let's say, a bar scale, right? A
Right,
line graph kind of
right,
idea of negative
right.
versus positive.
Yeah.
So then what did you do with that information? What did you do with that when you had that realization? What actually did you change in your mindset and
Mhm,
in the way you look at what you do
mhm.
to accommodate that realization?
So the first thing we all do when we have a question is we visit Google. And so I tried that. And I mean, now, granted, this was a good chunk of years ago. I think, I, I mean, when I try to Google how do we feel happier now, the advice is certainly a little bit better. It's still very generic, but it's still definitely better. But at that point, what ended up happening was there was a lot of nice quotes, you know, choose happiness and happiness comes from within and like, you know, think think positive thoughts, which was another one that really drove me bonkers because if you're anxious and depressed, no amount of someone telling you to think positive thoughts is actually going to change that for
Yeah.
you. But anyway, I just remember there was a lot of sort of more generic advice and advice that I didn't really know how to act on. And the one interesting thing that I thought was, like, there was no and maybe it's because somebody I am someone who's, like, I'm very systemized, like, I like having systems and frameworks,
Mhm.
and I fully appreciate that something like happiness is extremely individualized, right? Like, like, you will experience happiness in a different way than I would experience happiness. However, I sort of refuse to believe that fundamentally as human beings, like, there wasn't some similarity around what would make us happy, right? And I just sort of set out on this journey to figure out, like, is there a framework? Is there a set of fundamental things that we need in order to help us feel happier? And so I have a bit of a research background, and so what I first did was then I actually got super nerdy about it and dove into the research around happiness, and I read tons of research papers, and I started understanding that there was, like, fundamentally some things in life that help us as human beings shift towards feeling happier. Then I realized that there were countries on this earth that frequently rank the highest on the happiness scale. And so I studied those cultures. I wanted to understand why were they so different than what we are experiencing in North America? Like you're based in the States, I'm based in Canada. Like why is it that we are different than them? And from that I learned that there's some societal factors that really change how we experience how intensely we experience happiness. And probably the most pivotal shift for me was when I visited this country called Bhutan. They are the only country in the world that has a gross national happiness index. And this is what they use to measure the happiness of its citizens more so than GDP, right? Gross domestic product is sort of what all countries use to measure their progress, I guess, if you will, in the grand scheme of things. Uh, Bhutan just doesn't really care that badly about their GDP. They just really want to make sure that even if they're working on that, they balance the happiness level of their population. And so I studied this index and then I went to visit Bhutan and spent a little bit of time there. And in Bhutan, I just felt something different. Like their country is definitely not like the major cities in North America. It just it gave me a sense of peace and simplicity, not in a like they're not advanced kind of way, but like
Mhm.
simple things made them happy.
Yeah.
And they made decisions like the government did their best to make decisions with this idea of happiness in
Mhm.
mind. And
Wow.
I got to experience that and it felt very different. And so when I came back, I was like, imagine if our whole world learned to balance this idea of happiness a little bit better.
Wow. Okay, I have to back up a minute because you just took us on a leap from anxious and depressed
Mhm.
to Bhutan level happy.
Mhm.
So there was something that happened before that shift, right? Something precipitated you to even look at that.
Mhm.
What was that?
The first thing that comes to mind is this article that I read on the top 5 regrets of the dying. So this was a group of people who, were gonna leave us, in their physical form from Earth, and they've lived their life, and they were interviewed on their regrets. And I found it a little bit sad and kind of ironic that all the things that we sort of strive so hard for in life, um, how would I say it? Like the regrets sort of were those things. Do you know what I like?
Yeah,
It was very,
yeah,
what were the regrets? It was like, I wish I had the courage to live more true to myself than what others thought of me. And then I thought, well, how many times in our lives do we say yes to things that aren't really aligned to us? How many of us build a life based on what society tells us a successful, good life should look like? And then we follow that path without really questioning it. Because maybe if you question it and you decide that that's actually what you want, I think that's fantastic. But we don't question it. We don't dare
yeah,
question it because it would make us
mhm,
be very different than the
yeah,
people around us. And that doesn't feel
yeah,
safe sometimes, right? And so
yeah,
that I thought was interesting. And one of them was like, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. How many of us spend
yeah,
40 plus hours, 60? You even hear people who are like, I spent
yeah,
80 hours working.
yeah,
Not to say doing something for your career and your business isn't important, but like, again, like you're just like, wait, like, why do we do these things again without
yeah,
questioning, right? Like,
yeah,
I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Again, we're so sort of worried to express how we truly feel. And I say this with a lot of respect as someone who's gone through anxiety and depression. Sometimes you don't want to be in that space, but I
yeah.
think all emotions are a source of information. We just need to learn to
Yes,
process them better
yes,
instead of running away from them, which is again
yes.
something we don't really learn about, right? And
No,
then there's
not at
like,
all.
I wish I had spent more time with my friends and stayed in touch with them. Again, when we're working so hard, doing all the things we're supposed to be doing, the first thing that goes is our social connection, which is one of the biggest factors in how happy we are. And then the last regret of the dying literally was, I wish I had let myself be happier. And then you just take a look at that and you're like, that it wasn't like 5 people answered these questions, like a
Yeah,
lot of people answered
yeah,
these questions and this set of questions in this survey. And like, I don't know, like, yeah, you just look at it and you're like, "I if this is how people are feeling, then why don't we live our life according to those values?"
yeah. And not only that, those are each one of those things that you outlined are completely within our control
Mhm,
to have.
mhm,
That's why they're regrets. That when
mhm,
they get to the end, when we get to the end, that's why it's a regret because we realize we had the power to change that if we
mhm,
really wanted to. And if we really
mhm,
had any tools, we
mhm,
had the power. I mean, so many
mhm,
people fear okay, I don't want to get there because that's another whole conversation, but when you're talking about you as a physician,
mhm,
okay? I know what that path looks like and it is a
mhm,
grueling path
mhm,
just to get that particular license just to go through school and get all those things. And your social network narrows to the people that you are going into the school and the residencies and,
Mhm.
all the things that you have to do. Basically, that's your world. And that's the
Mhm.
amount of time you spend. And then to come out of that and do the job and then have all the specific criteria upon you for the requirements of the position and everything that we have that we have our physicians do for us.
Mhm.
And then you add on to that your own experience of anxiety and depression, and then you read this article.
Mhm.
Tell me about that how that actually fueled your shift into this new direction of happiness.
I'll say this, it didn't fuel it directly and immediately because, like you said, when you invest so much of your time, energy, money, um, into something that you've chosen as your career, it can be really hard to decide to change that. And maybe this is just me and how I thought about it, but it takes a little bit of courage and time and self-awareness to realize that this idea that as a doctor you're supposed to help save lives. Now I mean, again, just to be clear and to be honest about this, like I worked as a naturopathic doctor. I never worked in a life or death situation. It's
Mhm.
not, emergency room kind of surgeries, but I had a lot of people share with me their health journeys, which often was a lot more than physical health. There's always mental, emotional,
Oh
mindset
yeah.
stuff
Oh
in
yeah.
there. And it took me a little while to realize that the tools that I was given and that I earned and that my identity revolved around um wasn't able to direct people to lead the lives that I think they truly wanted to lead. Health is really important. Health is also a means to an end. And I say that because if you ask people why they want to be healthy, it usually has something to do with the fact that having a healthy body and a healthy mind will enable them to do something else in their life that they want. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but it just took a bit for me to be like, "Oh, I I want to help people do more and I want to help people be more and feel more of the things that they want in their life."
Okay, hold on. If your mindset was shifted, you were inspired to innovate, and you were spurred into action, don't just move on with your day. Focus, my friend, and take a few minutes to visit ceomischiefmaker.com to learn more about the value that was shared with you today. Please act now and create some CEO mischief of your own.